So my interest in science started from childhood. So very, very early, and still am a nerd. And as a kid, I was fascinated with pattern recognition. My dad had a budget for the local college, and what my dad would do is he would actually come home with these books full of budget numbers, like old books that weren't needed anymore. He'd come home with these books filled with numbers, and as a dorky kid, I would take these books. I was 6 years old. I would take them down to the basement, and I would go and circle and look for patterns in those numbers. So not your normal kid, but I knew all the way back then. I didn't know that there was a discipline named for it. I didn't know that this was science, but I did know that I just loved being able to use my mind to be able to find patterns. Started with interest in infectious diseases. At the time, there were major outbreaks happening in wild dolphin populations, and there were mass die-offs happening of dolphins dying from a virus that's closely related to measles in people. And so I was initially brought on to understand, what types of outbreaks and things could happen in dolphins. The dolphins at the Navy get such good care that I was able to focus away from infectious diseases because they were very well protected from these, and move into the longer play, which is aging dolphins. The Navy takes such good care of their dolphins that they live much longer than dolphins in the wild. So dolphins in the wild live to about 20 years old on average. At the Navy, they live to 30, 40, 50, and just recently learned even into 60 years old. So with this aging Navy dolphin population, the new task from a veterinary epidemiology perspective is understanding healthy aging in dolphins. And we unexpectedly found that aging dolphins were getting high cholesterol, chronic inflammation, fatty liver disease, even the full suite of changes consistent with Alzheimer's, the same diseases that we as people were getting. And most importantly, this was happening in about 1 in 3 aging dolphins, not all of them. So it left us with the question of why? That was when a big aha moment came. We were able to, because this population is such a clean population, they get the same health care, they get the same selection of fish, and it was from there that we were able to use an advanced technology called metabolomics, which allowed us to study thousands of small molecules present in both the dolphin's blood and their all fish diet to figure out which small molecules predicted the healthiest aging dolphins. And that's where we were shocked and surprised to see that it wasn't omega-3s, which is what we had predicted, that it was indeed C15, this odd chain saturated fatty acid, the same saturated fat that we have in our butter and whole fat milk. C15 is this odd chain saturated fatty acid that's been known since 1954. What nobody knew was that it was not only meaningful and beneficial, but that it was going to meet the rare criteria of being an essential fatty acid, the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in over 90 years. So the dolphins tipped us off to this, but long story short, that we were able to move C15 into the lab. We did 8 studies over 3 years to be able to understand how C15 works, at what concentrations, how to optimize it, how to purify it, so that we can be able to deliver C15, again, all of this through Navy funding and research, so that we could help develop and deliver a pure C15 ingredient that could tap into these healthy aging pathways. Now, essential means it's not just essential for dolphins, it's essential for humans. So the same time that we were finding higher C15 associated with better health in dolphins, the same findings were coming out in people. So today there are dozens and dozens, in fact, meta-analyses, so studies of studies showing that people with higher C15 have a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease, and even certain types of cancers. So that then led to this connection between dolphins and humans of C15. It was then that gave us the agency to move forth and develop this pure C15 ingredient, so that now shows the benefits of what it does. So what does C15 do for people? It's called a pleiotropic molecule, which means another way to say it is that it's promiscuous. So it kind of gets around, it targets a lot of important things in our bodies. One of its main roles of C15 is that it is a sturdy fatty acid, an odd chain saturated fat that physically strengthens our cell membranes. So our cell membranes are made of different types of fats. The more sturdy our fatty acids, the longer we live as a species. This was actually determined by A.J. Holbert back in 2005, thanks to what he called the cell membrane pacemaker theory of aging. And what he showed is the sturdier the fatty acids in a cell membrane, the longer a species lived. We already had tapped into how nature helps humans live longer than mice in the first place. So the key finding here we have made with C15, along with Dr. Nick Shork, who's head of NIH's Longevity Consortium, is that C15 is meeting these rare criteria of being a geroprotector. Now, it's not a very sexy word, but it's a really important concept, and that is geroprotectors are molecules that slow biological aging. So it actually slows the rate at which we age. We can't control our chronological age, but we sure can control how fast we age biologically. Nick and I worked together over 10 years to be able to do studies to show in many different ways how C15 actively slows the rate at which we age, primarily by stabilizing our cell membranes, slowing the rate of breakdown, and which enables us to live longer. Specific benefits with regard to metabolic, liver, and heart health to keep those diseases, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease, at bay. So it's been a very exciting finding for all of us. When we talk about people in their second 50, that C15, it's an essential fatty acid. It's needed at all ages, but it becomes increasingly critical as we get into our second 50. And that is because as we get older and we age, our cells become more fragile. They're more susceptible to age-related breakdown. We know there are all these different hallmarks of aging, parts of the longevity pathway that get tapped in and start getting a little creaky, cranky. We don't behave the way that we're supposed to. C15 comes in, and especially the pure C15 that we were able to develop with the Navy, it taps into the longevity pathway. It activates AMPK, it inhibits mTOR, it strengthens the cells. So it has all of these activities that help to not only slow biological aging, but for those of us in our second 50, it can actually help reverse those aging processes, which is why so many people, our biggest fans, are those that are in their second 50. It fixes what's broken, so you got to be broken in order to feel the fix. If you have a nutritional deficiency, you can fix it by getting the nutrient back into your body. Importantly, there is a way to test for C15. So C15's it's included now in most fatty acid panels that physicians can ask for. We also partnered with Genova Diagnostics to make a C15 specific at-home test so people can test their C15 levels. I am proud to say I'm in the longevity zone of about 0.46. Most people today are sitting at about 0.2%, which is right on the edge of fragility syndrome. So the people who are at greatest risk of having this C15 deficiency levels lower than 0.2% in our cells, which makes it more fragile, are really people born since the 1990s were born into a C15 deficient world. This is the time when recommendations initially came in 1977 to say stop drinking whole fat milk and stop eating butter. We did that, which did help get rid of the bad saturated fats, but it also got rid of this trace essential fatty acid. In the 1990s, those recommendations got even stronger for babies and the youngest children. So what's also happening is that with pediatricians and young children is that the recommendations are that for every parent of a 2-year-old is told to take their 2-year-old off of whole fat milk. And so we now know that this is this generation that is most likely to have the lowest C15 levels, and we think may explain why there are higher levels of heart disease. Type 2 diabetes are making a comeback in this generation. And then we're also seeing fatty liver disease, which non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, now called MASLD, didn't exist until 1980. We saw it pop up in the dolphins, and we were able to show that it was C15 deficiency that's causing this disease that now affects as many as 1 in 3 people globally. So let's get C15 back into, this movement is on. Let's get C15 back into the world. So let's change agricultural practices. Let's have ways for people to be able to see how much C15 is in various dairy products, and being able to provide the supplement is an added part of the solution. Higher levels of C15 have been found in people who live in high longevity zones, or these blue zones, and specifically in Sardinia. And it's really fascinating because Sardinia has both a high longevity zone and a low longevity zone, which really helps closer compare two populations living on the same island, of why some live to 100 and beyond and others don't. So in that study, they show that people who live in the high longevity zone have 2 to 3 times higher C15 compared to people who just on average have C15 levels of about 0.2%. So all of that is supported by the fact that people in Sardinia in these high longevity zones have a lower risk of developing heart disease, which is a big reason of why so many people, especially men, live to 100 and beyond in Sardinia. So it's really fascinating. We were then wondering where did the C15 come from? How did they get these higher C15 levels? And it ends up that they have just a perfect combination of having local goats and sheep that feed on mountainous grass. And that combination, studies have shown, both grass-fed ruminants plus grass that's at high altitude leads to higher C15 in the dairy fat. And so the cheeses that Sardinians make there, called pecorino cheese, have 2 to 3 times higher C15 compared to the rest of the world. They've also replaced a lot of their meat with cheese. There's a big reason why the Navy really wanted to ensure that we could develop a pure C15 supplement. And a big reason for that is because every food that has C15 in it it's only about 1% of the fats are C15. More than 40% of the fats in those same foods are pro-inflammatory saturated fats. So C15 is really put up against a bunch of bullies in food. The Navy said, hey, we want to be able to support you to be able to provide a pure C15 supplement that is bioavailable, vegan friendly, let's add that on top of it, and science backed. So all the science that we talk about, that we see with regard to how C15 works, that's all based upon this pure, optimized, patented C15 ingredient. How do we know how much we need? Well, the good thing is there's lots of population studies knowing how much we used to have in our bodies, and also how much we can get to optimize, for example, the Sardinian population, knowing if we can get to this 0.4 to 0.6%, equals lower risk of heart disease, various diseases, and longevity. All of these discoveries happening, this was a 10-year period of discovery, of science. There are now over 100 peer-reviewed papers from prestigious institutions throughout the world on the benefits of C15. Literally every week there's a new paper coming out on C15. So it's a very exciting time. Because of that, we were reached out by Simon & Schuster, who said, we've been following your work, we've been following your story, we saw your TED Talk, this is a book, like this needs to get written. So write it, I did, and put it together, and it is time. There is urgency, and it's not just to help us in our second 50, because goodness gracious, we're greatly enjoying the benefits of C15, but a lot of the urgency is coming from those who are younger than 50, and that is because what we're seeing is as many as 1 in 3 people are deficient in C15. It's the first deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years. You think vitamin C and scurvy and vitamin D and rickets, It's C15 deficiency and cellular fragility syndrome. So this deficiency syndrome is actually accelerating aging in those that are younger than us, and explaining why younger and younger people are getting diseases of older and older people. So children are getting diseases of their grandparents before their parents. So a big goal of our second 50 is we want to ensure that our children can make it to their second 50 and beyond. And so being able to help at all levels, it was a big driver for the book. There's so much science behind the importance of C15. It's an essential fatty acid we need from birth all the way to our latest years. And the book was really put together to help summarize these 100+ studies. We can't ignore the science anymore. We really need to get C15 back in our lives. It's an incredibly exciting time. It's been a pleasure and a gift to be able to have this discovery come from the Navy Dolphins, to be able to have it come to fruition over 10 years. You know, the goal of scientists, and again in the military, is you work with what works and you fail fast. So the fact that the data and the science has continued to mount and build, and understanding the urgency behind the ability to fix it and the ability to fix major global health problems relatively easily, and having all of our, we're no longer alone in the arena, right? What we call being able to fight the good fight to be able to improve global health. We're no longer alone. Our arena is now filled with experts in fatty acids and longevity, who are all working alongside us to be able to, fulfill the mission, which is improving health.